Everyone called her Madam Vionna Gold, the queen of fashion herself, the woman who could sew destiny into fabric. In every corner of Lagos, people whispered her name with both awe and envy. Her gowns made brides glow. Her suits brought men promotion. And her boutique on Victoria Avenue sparkled like a palace of miracles. But behind those golden doors, no one could imagine the darkness hidden behind her perfect smile. Something else was being stitched. Something no one dared to talk about. The morning sun rose gently over Victoria Avenue, painting golden light across the city's most famous fashion street. Tailors opened their shops. Assistants swept the front steps. And the sound of sewing machines filled the air like a busy orchestra. At the center of it all stood a building with gold letters that shimmered under the sun. Vionna Gold Creations inside. Everything gleamed: marble floors, crystal lights, glass shelves lined with perfumes, and laces imported from Paris. And in the middle of the hall sat Madam Vionna Gold, the woman everyone called the Queen of Elegance. Her hands moved gracefully as she sketched a new design, long red nails tapping the paper. She smiled proudly at her reflection in the mirror behind her. Her beauty was ageless, smooth skin, shining eyes, and a scent that made people turn when she walked past. Customers adored her. Young women whispered, "If Madam Vionna sews your gown, your destiny will shine." But that was what everyone thought. Behind her charm and fame hid a secret darker than midnight, a strange glow. Next door, in a small wooden shop, worked Ego, a humble tailor. Her space was small, but always filled with laughter, gospel music, and the smell of fresh fabric. She had only 2 apprentices and an old sewing machine she loved like a child. Every morning she greeted Madam Vionna politely. "Good morning." Ma Vionna would only nod, her dark glasses covering her eyes. Ego often wondered how Madam Vionna became so successful so quickly. In just 3 years, she'd gone from a street tailor to dressing politicians' wives and movie stars. Even the First Lady had worn her designs. One evening, as Ego packed up her shop, she noticed something unusual. Madam Vionna's driver, a tall man in a black suit, was loading boxes of finished clothes into her car. The fabrics shimmered faintly, like they were alive, glowing softly red under the streetlight. Ego blinked. Ah, is that light from the cloth?" she murmured. But when she looked again, the glow was gone. She brushed it off. Maybe it was just her eyes. 2 days later, a woman ran into Ego's shop crying. It was Kioma, one of Madame Vionna's regular customers. Her eyes were swollen, her hair scattered. "Ego, please help me. I need another dress quick." Ego stopped her machine. "Kioma, calm down. What happened? It's my wedding. My husband, he said he doesn't want to marry me again. He said I look like a monster when I wear my gown." "But it's Madame Vionna's gown. How can that be?" Ego frowned. He said, "You look like what, a monster?" He said he saw my face change like devil horns on me. He ran out screaming. Ego's heart skipped. She had heard similar stories, whispered in the market, women whose lives suddenly turned upside down after wearing Madame Vionna's designs. One lost her job. Another's husband started beating her violently after years of peace. Another simply disappeared. Still, no one dared to speak against Madame Vionna. Her influence was too strong that night. As rain fell softly over the city's, Ego couldn't sleep. She kept hearing Kioma's voice. He saw a monster. Something urged her to look outside. Through her small window, she saw headlights, Madame Vionna's black SUV, passing quietly down the road. But instead of turning toward her mansion, it drove toward the old abandoned quarry at the edge of town. Ego's curiosity burned. She grabbed her umbrella and followed from a distance. When she reached the quarry, she saw something she would never forget. Madame Vionna stepped out of the car wearing a long black gown. She carried her sewing basket, but inside, instead of threads and needles, strange red lights flickered. She walked toward a group of hooded figures waiting near a fire. Ego hid behind a rock. Trembling, the figures formed a circle as Madame Vionna placed the basket in the middle. One of them, an old woman with white eyes, spoke in a cracked voice. "You have done well, daughter of the thread. Many destinies have been delivered. Your fame grows." Vionna bowed her head. "But I need more. I want the world. I want no rival, no competition, then bring more souls, the old woman hissed. Every cloth you sew must carry the mark of the coven. When your customers wear them, their destinies shall feed us. Vionna nodded slowly. She lifted her right hand, pricked her finger with a needle, and let a drop of blood fall into the fire. The flames turned purple. Ego gasped, covering her mouth. The wind roared. Voices cried out from nowhere, hundreds of voices of women, screaming, weeping, our destinies, our lives. The coven vanished into thin air. Madam Vionna closed her basket, looked around suspiciously, and walked back to her car. Ego hid until the sound of the engine faded the hidden pot. The next morning, Ego visited Madame Vionna's shop, pretending to pick up fabric for a client. She watched carefully. Behind the main hall was a small room with the door slightly open. Inside, she saw a black pot under the sewing table, smoke rising faintly, and a strong smell of burnt fabric and iron. Ego's hands began to shake. She understood everything, the reason Madame Vionna's customers suffered, the reason marriages broke, destinies died, and beauty turned into shame. It was the clothes. Each one carried a curse sewn with blood and dark incantations. Ego left the shop quietly, whispering to herself if people knew what she was doing, they would never wear her dresses again. But she also knew exposing Madam Vionna Gold would not be easy. People worshipped her like a goddess, and the coven that protected her was powerful. Still, Ego made a silent vow. She would uncover the truth, even if it cost her everything. As she locked her shop that night, she heard something from the wind, a soft voice, almost like a whisper from far away. Don't interfere, Ego, or you will be the next design. The light flickered. Her sewing machine started on its own needle, moving fast with no one touching it. She screamed, and that was how the battle between light and darkness began. Night never truly sleeps on Victoria Avenue, but that evening the whole street seemed quieter than usual. Ego sat alone in her small shop, the only light coming from a flickering kerosene lamp. Her sewing machine was still, covered with a piece of cloth. Yet the memory of what she had witnessed at the quarry refused to fade. Her heart pounded as she replayed Madame Vionna's words, every cloth you sew must carry the mark of the coven. Ego shivered. Jesus, what kind of woman is she? She wanted to tell someone, but who would believe her? In that city, Madam Vionna Gold was a celebrity. Her face was on billboards. Even churchwomen bragged about wearing her lace. If Ego spoke, they would laugh, or worse, Vionna would hear and destroy her. So Ego kept silent, but she started to watch. The next few weeks were strange. One after another, Madame Vionna's customers came to Ego's shop for urgent repairs. Each one looked exhausted, eyes sunken, as though sleep had abandoned them. Adara, a banker, whispered while Ego fixed the torn sleeve of her designer gown. Since I wore this cloth, my dreams are full of shadows. Every night, someone is calling my name from a dark pit. Ego's hand trembled on the needle. Did you buy this from Madam Vionna? Adara nodded. Why? Ego smiled weakly. Nothing, my sister. Just asking. Later that same day, another woman, Mrs. O'Keefe, known for her happy marriage, burst in crying. My husband slapped me for the first time yesterday. We never fight. It started after our anniversary dinner, when I wore that gold gown Madam Vionna made for me. Ego's fear deepened. The pattern was clear now. Every dress from Madame Vionna's shop brought pain. She began collecting small pieces of leftover cloth from the clients who came for repairs. She kept them hidden in a tin box, determined to find out what secret they carried. One night, after closing, Ego sat with a candle and a magnifying glass. She unfolded a tiny scrap of pink silk from Vionna's boutique and examined the stitches. At first, everything looked normal until she noticed a faint black thread woven deep inside the lining. It wasn't part of the design. The thread formed a symbol, a spiral with 3 sharp points, almost like a snake curling around itself. The moment she touched it, her candle flickered violently and went out. Ego gasped and jumped up. Blood of Jesus. When she relit the candle, she saw something that froze her heart. The black thread had turned red. As if wet with fresh blood, she dropped the fabric and ran outside to breathe. The air felt heavy, thick with whispers she couldn't understand. That night she dreamt of Madam Vionna sewing under a red moon, her eyes glowing like coals. Around her dozens of faceless women stood motionless, wearing her gowns. When Ego tried to scream, the mannequins turned their heads toward her and whispered in one voice, "You cannot unstitch destiny." Ego woke drenched in sweat. Clutching her chest the next morning, she went straight to Mama Nkechi, a prophetess who lived behind the market. The old woman was blind in one eye, but known for seeing things no one else could. Ego handed her the piece of cloth. "Mama, please, tell me what you see." The old woman held it for a moment, then hissed and threw it on the floor. "Who gave you this evil?" Ego stammered. "It's from Madam Vionna Gold's shop." Mama Nkechi crossed herself. "That woman is not working for God. She is a daughter of darkness. This cloth carries the mark of exchange when her customers wear it. Their destinies are swapped for her success. Every broken marriage, every lost blessing, becomes another step on her throne." Ego's voice trembled. "So what can I do?" The prophetess shook her head. "Nothing easy. You must stay pure, child. She will come for you soon. Light your lamp every night and pray, because the coven will not let you rest now that you know." Ego left trembling. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking all through the walk home. That night the wind was strong. The roof rattled and the street dogs howled endlessly. Ego knelt beside her bed, praying. But halfway through her prayer, the sewing machine in the corner began to move on its own again. Click, 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 the needle stabbing air. Then a familiar perfume filled the room, the same perfume Madam Vionna always wore. Ego turned slowly, and there she was, Madam Vionna Gold stood by the doorway, dressed in black silk, face calm, smile deadly. "Ego," she said softly, "you've been very curious lately." Ego froze. How did you enter my house?" Vionna chuckled. "Doors are for humans, my dear. Curiosity is dangerous, especially when it's about me." She stepped closer, her eyes glowing faintly red. "You're a talented tailor. I could help you. Money, fame. Just stop asking questions." Ego gathered courage. "And let you destroy more lives." "Never." Vionna's smile vanished. "Then you have chosen your path." The lights went out. A cold wind blew through the room, scattering thread and fabric everywhere. When the lights returned, Madam Vionna was gone. Only her perfume remained and a single black thread lying across. Ego's Bible, The Fires of Fear. From that night onward, everything changed. Customers stopped coming to Ego's shop. Rumors spread that she was jealous of Madam Vionna and wanted to spoil her business. Some of her friends avoided her. One evening, her small shop caught fire mysteriously. Neighbors helped her put it out, but most of her materials were destroyed. Still, Ego refused to give up. She knew this was the coven's doing, trying to silence her before she could expose the truth. She knelt in the ashes of her workshop and cried, "God, if you are real, show me what to do. I cannot fight this woman with my hands alone." A sudden peace filled her heart. A voice deep inside whispered, "The darkness fears the light. Gather the victims together, you will break the curse." Ego wiped her tears. "Then I'll do it." Over the next few weeks, Ego secretly visited Madam Vionna's former clients, women whose lives had fallen apart. She told them what she knew, showed them the cursed thread, and one by one they believed. Some were sick, others divorced, a few had even lost children. All carried the same symbol sewn into their clothes. They decided to confront Madam Vionna together, but before they could act, one of the women, Kioma, was found dead in her apartment, wearing a brand new dress from Vionna's latest collection. The police called it sudden cardiac arrest. Ego knew better. She stood at Kioma's funeral, staring at the coffin, whispering, "You won't die for nothing, my friend. I swear I'll end her curse." As the coffin was lowered, thunder rolled through the sky, even though the day was clear. Somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of a sewing machine echoed, steady, sinister, endless. The city seemed peaceful during the day, but at night, shadows whispered secrets that only Ego could hear. She knew the coven was watching, waiting for her next move. The moment she tried to fight Madam Vionna, the darkness would come alive. Ego sat in her half-rebuilt shop, surrounded by scraps of cursed fabric she had collected. Each one carried the same spiral symbol. Black threads hidden deep in the hymn's V were a roadmap to the horror Vionna had spread. She knew she couldn't fight alone. Ego began visiting the women whose lives had been ruined. She approached them one by one, carefully, quietly. Some had been abandoned by husbands, some had seen their fiancés run screaming, and others had endured beatings after wearing Vionna's cursed gowns. One by one they joined her 20 women, broken yet determined, each carrying a thread of Vionna's dark power. Ego showed them how to recognize the cursed stitch, how to burn it safely, and how to pray over themselves. The coven's power works because they feed on fear, Ego explained. If we remain calm and act together, we can weaken their hold. But we must be careful. Vionna will not let us destroy her empire easily. They decided to confront Madam Vionna at her boutique. At night, when she would be at her most vulnerable, preparing the next batch of cursed clothes for the coven that night. Ego and the women crept toward Vionna Gold Creations. The street was empty, save for the flickering neon signs. A sudden wind howled, shaking the street lights. Ego's heart raced as they approached the boutique. The door burst open by itself. A shadow leapt from the darkness, circling them, whispering in 1,000 voices at once. You dare come for her, your blood will be my next thread. Ego recognized the signature of the coven's magic immediately. Black threads slithered across the walls. Moving as though alive, the women screamed. But Ego raised her hand, pray, pray, to break their hold together. They chanted, and the threads recoiled, hissing like snakes, but just as they thought they were safe, a cold wind swept the room. Madam! Vionna appeared at the top of the stairs, her black gown flowing like liquid darkness. Her eyes glowed red and a smile twisted across her face. So the little tailor dares to challenge me? Before Ego could respond, Vionna snapped her fingers a wave of cursed energy shot through the room. The women fell to the floor, clutching their heads, writhing in pain. Shadows stretched from the walls, forming the twisted faces of women who had already been claimed by the coven. Your courage is admirable, Vionna whispered, but courage will not save you from destiny. Ego crawled forward, holding a piece of blessed fabric. She remembered Mama Nkechi's words. The darkness fears the light. We will not let you destroy more lives. Ego shouted. The blessed fabric glowed, cutting through the shadows. Vionna hissed, stepping back, and for the first time, her eyes flickered with fear. Vionna raised her hand and whispered a spell. Suddenly, Ego was thrown into a vision, a nightmare. She was standing in the middle of a forest, surrounded by screaming women whose faces were twisted in pain. Black threads wrapped around her limbs, pulling her down into the dirt. Give up, Ego, a voice hissed from nowhere. You cannot stop what has already been sown. But Ego remembered Mama Nkechi's final warning. Stay pure, pray. The coven will fear your light, if your heart is true. She clenched her fists, prayed with all her might, and the black threads snapped. The screaming women faded. Ego fell to the ground, panting, but alive. When she opened her eyes, Vionna had disappeared. The boutique was empty, eerily silent. The cursed threads had vanished for now. Ego knew this was only the beginning. The coven had realized she was a threat. Madame Vionna's power would grow stronger, and her attacks would become more personal that night. A strange package appeared on Ego's doorstep. Inside was a beautiful gown, brand new, with a red tag. Wear this, and your friends will die before morning. Ego trembled. She knew this was a warning. Vionna was trying to frighten her, to turn her away. But Ego had learned one thing. Courage and determination could shine in the darkest nights. You may strike at me, Ego whispered, holding the cursed gown, but I will strike back. I will save every life you have ruined from the shadows. A faint voice seemed to echo, mocking her. You are mine now. Ego and destiny will decide if you survive. And with that, the city went quiet again, but Ego knew the final battle was coming. The city slept uneasily that night. The neon lights flickered. The wind carried whispers through empty streets. And somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of a sewing machine echoed, a sound that chilled even the bravest hearts. Ego sat in her small workshop, surrounded by the women whose lives Madam Vionna had ruined. Each one was trembling, fearful, yet determined. They had come together, united by pain and courage. ready to confront the darkness that had haunted them for years tonight. "We end this," Ego said, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. The women nodded. Some clutched pieces of blessed cloth, others held candles. Together, they formed a circle. Hands joined, hearts praying. Ego had discovered the hidden place of the coven deep in the forest where shadows moved like living things. Trees twisted unnaturally, and the air was thick with whispers of despair. They approached cautiously, hearts pounding with every step. At the center of the clearing stood a massive circle of fire, surrounded by hooded figures chanting in a language older than the city itself. Madam Vionna stood in the middle, her black gown flowing like smoke, eyes glowing red. Her basket of cursed dresses was at her feet, the threads writhing like snakes. Ego, Vionna said, "Smiling cruelly, you've come far, but this is where your courage ends." The coven raised their hands, and black threads shot toward the group of women. They screamed as the threads wrapped around them, trying to pull them into the fire. Ego held up a piece of blessed cloth Mama Nkechi had given her. It glowed like the sun, cutting through the darkness in the name of light and justice. "I command you, release them." The threads recoiled, hissing like snakes. The coven screamed in anger. Madam Vionna's eyes narrowed. Madam Vionna began chanting faster, and the basket of cursed dresses opened. Hundreds of threads flew into the air, weaving around her like a living cloak of darkness. Ego ran forward, holding her blessed cloth high. She began to chant prayers aloud, her voice strong, steady, and unafraid. The threads around the women broke, snapping like dry twigs. Vionna hissed, "Stepping forward, you think light can defeat darkness? You are nothing." But Ego was not afraid. She ran straight toward Vionna, the blessed cloth glowing brighter with every step. She pressed it against the basket. A scream pierced the night high, terrible, echoing through the forest. The black threads writhed violently, trying to escape the cloth's light, but they were pulled into the glowing fabric like moths to a flame. Vionna screamed, "Nitrogen monoxide, this cannot be my empire, my power." Suddenly, the coven's power turned against them. The black threads that had haunted the women for years wrapped around the hooded figures, choking them. One by one, they fell to the ground. Shrieking, Vionna tried to escape, but Ego and the women closed in. Ego pressed the blessed cloth against Vionna's chest. The red glow of the cursed threads clung desperately to her, trying to bite and burn, but the light was stronger. "This ends tonight, Vionna Gold," Ego shouted. Vionna screamed one final time as the threads pulled her into the basket, which now glowed a blinding white. The coven's voices vanished, replaced by silence so thick it made the women's hearts pound when the light faded. All that remained in the clearing was a mannequin dressed in the gown Vionna had worn, his face blank, lifeless. The cursed basket had trapped her for Reeve. The women wept and hugged each other. Their lives were theirs again, marriages healed, broken hearts mended, careers restarted, peace returned to their souls. Ego looked at the people one last time. Her hands shook. "You will never hurt anyone again," she whispered. The group returned to the city, their hearts lighter. But Ego knew this. Darkness would always exist somewhere. What mattered was courage, faith, and unity against it. That night, Ego sat in her workshop, sewing machine silent, the blessed cloth in her hands. She smiled softly, finally at peace, but from somewhere deep in the shadows, a soft voice whispered, barely audible, "Stitch, stitch, stitch." Ego froze. She smiled faintly. "Not today," she said, and turned back to her sewing, knowing that light would always fight darkness, and sometimes all it took was one brave heart. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, and share so you don't miss our next stories.